Today we're going to take a look at Covington's 761 tabletop wet belt sander. Now Covington makes two models of this sander, the 760, which is slightly less horsepower in the motor, and the 761, which is this model here that has a higher horsepower motor at 1/2 horsepower. The 761 sander that we have here is our shop model. You can see it's got some use to it, so it's not pristine and clean right out of the box. But we are going to go through and show you how to set up this belt sander once it comes out of the box, including connecting your water supply up here, and also taking a look on how best to mount your belts and make sure that they are running both true with enough tension on them. This area of the belt sander is complicated for a few people, so we're going to try and make that a little bit demystified and easier to work with. There are a number of things in here that once you set, you don't have to mess with again. I have intentionally sort of messed up this area so we can start from scratch. If you have this belt sander and have kind of messed up this area so that it's not working well for you, we're going to show you how to fix that as well. So let's dive into this sander. Now you'll notice on the top of your sander you have this nice little compression valve. Here's your valve opening where you open this to get your water going to your belt sander. It's just an open valve like that. But you have to get the water coming to your belt sander first, and that's what this little compression valve is for. Let me turn this so you can see it a little bit better from this angle. So you'll unscrew this nut that is on your water intake, and you'll see on the inside you've got this nice little compression valve. If you were going to run a copper water line into your inlet valve, these two pieces are the only two pieces you'll need. You'll thread your nut onto your copper water line, then you'll thread your compression valve on, then your copper water line will go into your valve here, and when you screw the nut on, the compression valve will cinch down onto your copper water line and prevent any leaks. Now most of the time you're going to be using something like this. This is a 1/4 inch polyethylene tubing. We sell these kits. You can pick this up at Lowe's or Home Depot. When you put a compression valve onto a polyethylene tubing like this, once you cinch it down with the nut, it's actually going to crimp this plastic a little bit too much, so you're going to end up with some water leakage out of the back here. So if you do use this polyethylene tubing, the other part you'll need is this little brass sleeve. Now you can also pick these up from Lowe's, Home Depot, places like that. We also have these in kits as well, so if you do need these with the polyethylene tubing, we have that option. What you'll end up doing is you want to thread your nut onto your polyethylene tubing. Then you want to put your compression valve onto your polyethylene tubing. And that's going to be a little bit tighter, it's supposed to be. Then you want your brass sleeve to go into your tubing. Now what this will do, and you can see here, this is going to give your tubing some resistance against the compression nut here, so it won't crimp your tubing. So now you can move your compression nut up over the brass sleeve, insert your line into your water valve, and then screw on your nut. Now you will also want to use a wrench to tighten this down. Once it tightens down, it will tighten down the compression nut on your polyethylene tubing and give you a very tight seal onto your water line here that goes into your belt sander. From here you'll be able to turn on your water and get water to your belt sander, and you won't have any leaks from the backside here. Now the top area of your belt sander here is where a lot of people seem to have problems. You've got a couple of different things going on here, so it's best to try and spell out exactly what's happening. The main knob here is going to be your tracking. This is going to adjust when your belt moves to the left and to the right on your belt sander. So this is tracking. Your knob down here is your tensioning. So this controls the space between the rollers on your belt sander, on the top and the bottom. So it's going to determine how tight the belt is on your belt sander. Now these two here, you never really want to mess with these. This is actually the bolt that holds your roller into your belt sander. So if you over tighten this guy here, what you're going to do is crack the casing on your roller. That is not covered under your warranty, so you want to make sure not to do that. Don't mess with this little guy here. You really only have to worry about these two knobs, your tracking and your tensioner. Now, a lot of people will start messing with the tensioner and throw their belt sander all out of whack. So we're going to try and show you here a little bit of how to deal with the tensioner to correctly get your belts on here along with the tracking. These two work in tandem, so you're going to be able to use both your tensioner and your tracking initially to get your belt working correctly on your belt sander. So we've got our 761 sander, and I've got a little belt here that we use. These are 3" by 41.5 inch. What you'll want to do is feed your belt over the lower roller and in front of your flat platen, and then feed it onto the top roller on your belt sander. Now you don't have to put it all the way on, you just want to feed it a little bit of the way on. We're going to show you how to get these belts on and off once we've fixed our tension and our tracking on this one. So let's see how badly off we are on this. I'm going to turn our sander on and see what happens. So you can see our belt is pretty loose. You can hear it hopping around a little bit maybe, and you can see it's way over to the right. It's not tracking correctly on this bottom roller here. So what I'm going to do is increase my tracking. So if I turn this knob, our tracking knob, towards me, that's going to increase the pressure on the tracking. And you can see our belt's not sounding as bad anymore. And it's starting to move a little to the right. Now this is starting to get kind of tight, which means I don't want to over tighten my tracking, but my belt's still way over to the right on my bottom roller. So that's where we're going to take a look at our tensioning knob here. So if I take my 7/16 inch wrench and start to tighten up my tension knot, and remember, lefty loosey, righty tighty. We're tightening up our tensioning. So I'm going to continue to tighten up our tension here. And I'm getting some resistance from it now. And now I can start adjusting my tracking again. So it's a little bit of back and forth. Now my tensioning's a little too tight. So I'm going to loosen up my tensioning, tighten up my tracking a little bit more. And you can see my belt's moving further and further over to the left. And you don't want to tighten it too much as the belt will continue to move. And you can see I'm a little bit off to the left now. So I'm going to move my tracking back and loosen that up a little bit. Now I'll give it a minute or two to seat. And you see I've moved a little bit too far to the right again. Okay, I'm going to tighten up my tracking just a little bit more and let my belt move back. And you can see how these two work in tandem. Now once you have your tensioning set, generally if you're going to use the same type of belts, like a silicon carbide belt in various grits, you can leave your tensioning alone and just use your tracking to adjust your belts. Now when you start using your belt, putting the pressure against your belt will also start to adjust whether your belt is tracking correctly. That's where you'll want to go and adjust your tensioning. If you don't have your tension tight enough, when you put pressure against your belt, it may slide to the left and to the right. You may want to increase your tension, and then you're going to have to adjust your tracking again until you get this right. So let's say our belt is running pretty true on both drums right now. It's nice and straight, but I'm done with this belt and I want to take it off. So what's the best way to do that? The best way to take belts on and off the 761 sander is to adjust your tracking. So I'm going to take my tracking and start to loosen it up. Now when I loosen the tracking, you can see that my belt is shifting over to the right. The looser I go, the further it goes. So you want to loosen up your tracking to the point where your belt's nice and loose on your rollers. And you can hear it probably smacking against there, and you can tell it's very loose. Once it's that loose, I will turn the power off and we'll be able to slide our belt off the drums. So when you want to put a new belt on, you do the same thing in reverse. You put your belt over your drums, both the top and the bottom drum, and you don't want to try and put it all the way to the edge. And you want to try and put it more toward the edge. You don't want to try and put your belt all the way onto either drum because they're not going to be that loose. You can go ahead and tighten up your tracking a little bit if you want to. Turn your belt sander back on, and your belt's going to be floppy again, but all you need to do is tighten up your tracking. Since I'm using the same type of belt, I don't have to mess with my tension at all. I just need to adjust my tracking. And you can see once it's adjusted, the belt will slowly drift off to the left until I'm nice and seated directly in the middle of my drums, and that's where you want it. Now it may drift to the left and right some more. You can always either adjust your tracking, or if it's clicking very badly, you may have it too tight, adjust your tensioning, then adjust your tracking to keep your belt in the middle of the drums as much as possible. Super simple to work with this.